technical issues. What was it? And we are recording tonight, so at least for this one. All right, so I think my batteries are dying in this thing. All right. So topics we're going to talk about: scope of practice, patient consent and refusal, and other legal issues. So there are a lot of legal issues. This article in front of you shows. Your scope of practice is what you're allowed to do by federal and state law. We kind of went over that. We talked a little bit about that the first night with Chapter 17 in Wyoming state statutes. You also, on your little disk drives, you have the scope of practice from the EMS office, and you have the national standard scope of practice. Scope of practice is the regulations that considerations for the job that define the job. These are defined by legislation. They're defined by the state EMS office, and some of it is flexible. So like as EMTs, you're in a really rigid class. It's the second lowest EMS service or EMS job description. So you have set medicines that you can give, and you have set ways that you can give them. And it's either by protocols or standing orders, or it's by phoning in. Most of the meds as an EMT that you can give are phone-in ones. You have to call and get permission from the doctor to give that medication. As you go up in your scope, that the scope of medicines or the amount of medicines that you can give expands, and the liberties you have to give those medications also expand. Well, what's that mean? If I give the wrong drug and I'm allowed to give that drug, but I give it wrong, who's at fault? Me. So there's a lot of medications that we carry on our bus that we can give as paramedics that before I give it, I'm pulling out my book and looking and seeing what the actual dosage is. I'm either pulling out the little medical book that I carry with me, or I'm pulling out our protocols. And I'm looking and seeing what the correct dosage is, because I don't want to give the wrong dose. There's a lot of medications that we carry on the rigs that we don't give it. I mean, if you ask me how much fentanyl to give someone, I'll ask what their weight is, and I can give you a ballpark figure as to what we're going to give that person. But labetalol, I've never given labetalol in my life. So that's one of those meds. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to see what it's used for and what the dosage is. And there's nothing wrong with it. You're not going to memorize every drug that you got. You guys have what? I think 9 drugs, 7, 9 drugs that you can give. Out of those 7 to 9 drugs, probably pretty easy to memorize those doses. But are you going to remember them in the heat of the moment? Probably not. And as long as it's not, I mean, a life-threatening drug, like, or it's not a life-threatening situation, yeah, you got time. Look it up. And even if it is a high-stress situation, have your partner look it up. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. The standard of care. Standard of care is basically the definition of it is care that would be expected from an EMT in similar training when caring for a patient in a similar situation. The standard of care is what's called the common law theory. Common man theory is that any EMT in a similar situation with similar training that you have would have done the same thing as you have. But reasonable man. Okay? So You'll see that a lot in just about every laws that are written out there. Driving emergency vehicles. You're to drive in a safe, safe, prudent manner. Basically, what it means, we're not going to be out there driving stupid. Okay? If a reasonable man would look at what you're doing and say it's okay, then what you're doing is okay. If a reasonable person looks at what you're doing and they say, "Oh, I would have never done that," then you probably shouldn't. So when we're talking about medical, legal, and ethical issues, we're going to be talking a lot about the reasonable man kind of theory behind it. Okay. Your scope of practice is what you can do. Your standard of care is how you should do it. So we have in our trucks, we have policies and procedures and standard operation guidelines. Standard operation? Yeah, SOGs. So standard operations guidelines. So your standard operation guidelines are basically your standard. The doctor has looked at what you can do, and he said you can do this without problem. Okay, that's what those are for, and that all the meds that you can do are in your scope of practice. So, like I said, what you can do, you look at that scope of practice that we handed out, or from that thumb drive for you. It'll have a yellow box, I think, is for EMTs. And if you look at those EMTs, that has check blood glucose. Okay, that's not necessarily a medication, but it's within your scope of practice that you guys can check your blood sugar. Insert an oral air, insert a nasal air. Those are things that we're going to train you to do, and you will be able to do that per your scope of practice. So all that is within the scope of practice. Oxygen is the medication that you can give without calling in and asking for an order. So those are certain things that, as we go through the class, you're going to start saying, okay, this is something I can do without calling in. This is something I have to do. Okay. Patient consent. So you must have permission from your patient to assess, treat, and transfer. That means when you come into a house, and as you walk in the door, you see the patient sitting in a chair, you walk up to him, you always introduce yourself. My name is Jim, I'm paramedic. How may I help you today? Or may I help you today? What's going on today? You mind if I treat you? Whatever you want to say to them, there is no standard. This is what you're going to say to them to get permission. Just come up to them and somehow get consent to touch. A lot of times I'll ask them, what's going on today? Or what brought me here today? They will give me whatever the call was. Say, you mind if I treat you? Once I say yes, then I go in and start treating. Once you've treated them, and assessed them and treated them, now you got to get their permission to transport. And one of the big ones out there is diabetic emergencies. We will go to a diabetic emergency. The person is unconscious, unresponsive, with blood sugar at 23. We give them dextrose. They wake up, now alert and oriented, and they don't want to go to the hospital. We can't force them to go to the hospital. Ask them if we can make them a sandwich. Make them a sandwich, make sure they eat something, make sure there's someone there with them, and then we have them sign a refusal. If they want to go to the hospital, it's called express consent. So express consent means the person is alert, oriented, able to answer questions, know where they are, and are able to make a sound judgment on their condition. And they tell us, yes, I want to go. That's express consent. Implied consent comes back to the reasonable man. There's something that has altered their mental status, something they're unconscious, something's wrong that they can't give express consent. A reasonable man would want to go into the hospital if they had this condition. At that point in time, we can take them into the hospital even if they don't want to. That being said, in the state of Wyoming, alcohol is not a debilitating condition that we can take them on a flight. Unless, of course, they're unconscious. If they're just drunk, they can answer who they are, what they're doing, but they can't walk. They don't want to go with us. As long as they can get a ride someplace else, we can't force them to go. Okay. Children, mentally competent adults. With these, minors are not legally permitted to provide consent or refuse treatment. Okay. What that means is if we go on a scene and everybody on that scene is under the age of 18, we have to get permission from their parents to treat it. Now, if their injuries are bad, we're going to go under implied consent and at least start getting vitals on them just to make sure they're okay. Okay. If we can't get in touch with the parents and their injuries are such that they need to be transported, if they are up walking around, no injuries, we're going to keep trying to get in touch with the parents because we can't release them until we have parents' permission to release them or to treat them. Catch-22 for the kids, because that means we can't go anywhere until we get in touch with a parent or a guardian. Most of the time, if they're injured, we're going to transport them and hopefully get in touch with the parents at some point.
So that can also get kind of tricky when other family members besides the parents are on scene, but the parents are not. So just because your aunt and uncle are on scene, if I'm able to get in touch with a parent, that's who takes precedent over the aunt and uncle, because aunts and uncles are not classed as legal guardians unless there's paperwork involved. So it gets kind of in a gray area. And a lot of the times it can, as long as it doesn't delay the patient care, that's usually the best route, is still get in touch with the parents and then have them on the phone with you be able to transfer that power to them for this specific incident.
This also goes with mentally incompetent adults, people who can't make decisions for themselves. People who are their legal guardians are the ones that are going to be making decisions. Possible exceptions. Local parentis. I looked that up earlier and I forgot what it is. Anybody read the chapter? Know what that is?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
in place of parent.
Oh, yeah. That's right. So kids on baseball trips, band trips. You guys go down to the police, stuff like that. So if you're on a trip and your parents have signed over, I don't want to say parental rights, but giving you legal guardianship for that trip, then they can sign off. Emancipated minors. So for Wyoming, at the age of 16, you can go through, file through the courts for emancipation. Thing about that is they have to have the paperwork. They can't just tell you they're emancipated and say, "Oh, I left paperwork at home." Well, when you got emancipated, they said you need to keep this on you all the time. At that point in time, we're still getting in touch with somebody other than them. The other exception to this law is minor female who's pregnant has the right to make the decisions on her child. So if like my ex-wife was 15 when she had her first kid. Once that kid was born, her parents didn't have the right to make the decisions for that kid. She did. So even though she was 15, 16 years old, it was her child, so she got to make the decisions, medical decisions on that. Possible exceptions, life-threatening, minor children, and minor serving in the armed forces. That's another one. That 17-year-old who's in the military has the right to make their own decisions. Any questions on consents? There's mud or yeah, pretty good. Right. Involuntary transport. Patients considered a threat to themselves or others. Court order. Court orders are like 381s where we pick people up to WBI for mental evaluation, stuff like that. We can also be court ordered for transports to Evanston. Court orders don't happen very often, but they are out there. Usually mental health is involved. We usually don't transport with a police officer unless the person is violent or has a violent history. But we will transport every once in a while with law enforcement. And then if they are restrained in any way, you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on their health and well-being during this time. So we have things called soft restraints that you guys will get familiar with later on in the class. When we put those on, they are restricting, but don't restrict total movement. But you do have to watch them because if they're not put on properly, they can tighten to the point where they cut off the circulation. Or if they're not tightened properly, they can loosen them and slip out. And now you got someone who is in restraints for a reason, who's now able to swing it. So you want to make sure, and we will teach you the proper way of putting them on. Yeah. If they are in handcuffs, try and get the officer to put them in a belly chain and cuff them in front. We don't lay patients on their stomach ever. I have had patients that I put them on their side in handcuffs and they've rolled to their stomach, and we have to keep trying to roll them off their stomach because that's the way patients die in custody. Is laying on their stomach, unable to use their hands to relieve pressure off their abdomen. They end up the fist. Yeah. Due to a lot of them are round, have little rounder bellies. So abdomen pushes up into the diaphragm and it prevents the diaphragm from moving. Pretty soon they go into a hypoxic state, pass out and die, and you just thought they were finally cooperating. Okay, patient may refuse transport under the following circumstances. They are legally able to consent. In other words, they're of a legal age to consent. They are awake and oriented. They must be fully informed. And they must be asked to sign a release form. For the most part, we can, as long as you, okay, I give basically the same speech to everyone majority of the time. It's not always, I don't never say always that I do this, but I will tell them, you're signing this form. It's not saying that we're going to bill you. This is saying that you understand that you've been in an accident or a situation that is life-threatening, possibly life-threatening, that you understand by signing this paper that you could further injure yourself, your medical condition be worse, up to and including death. Now, I have told this to people who have a broken finger and they're gonna drive themselves, or they're fine, whatever. And they laugh at me when I say that, but I say that every single time because I have told that patient that by refusing transport or treatment from us, they could possibly die. And if I ever go to court on some, because they didn't tell me the consequences, so I give the same speech to every person signing it. As much as you can cover yourself legally, it's just the best thing for you to do. I don't know why.
I think it's just because of the daily
We got our asses kicked.
When we are able to show you a refusal form, all of us have a different way of going about the speech, but that fully informed is also telling them everything on the piece of paper that they're signing. It's not just, hey, these are all the things we see, you could die. It's also, hey, this is all the information you gave. You're informed. I'm informing you that all this is what you told me. Make sure all that's correct. Everything that's written down, and then why they're signing, how they're signing, and what that means.
Is there a refusal? Yeah. Okay. You look on page. People don't bring 86. 86. All right, so the refusal form, if you look at it, there's a place for name, date of birth, address, all that. You're gonna ask them what kind of medications they have. Yeah, this isn't what ours looks like, but there's a place for. That's like way different from ours. Yeah, what we'll do is Tanner's gonna run down and grab one, and then we'll pass it around. But basically, the top portion of it is demographics, name, address, date of birth, age. It asks for a social security number, but we never ask the person for a social security. I really don't care. I don't need it. That's a piece of information that if it gets out there, so we don't ask for that. Right below that is, do you have a position? If they do, you write down the name, if they know it. If they don't know it, then you just hit NA or no. Next one is allergies. You write down their allergies. Next one is medications. You write down their medications if they know them. And then the last section of that is their medical history. So what conditions do they have that we need to know? Then below that is a section where it says LOC. So LOC has two meanings on this form because it's on there twice. The first one is LOC location. Are they at home? Are they on the highway? Where were they at? And right kind of below that is something that where it happened. So location is home, street, whatever. Right below it is your address. So mile marker 1 on Highway 59. 230 South North 2nd Street. That's what's going to go in there, where it at, the actual location. And then beside it is for motor vehicle crash, trauma, or medical. So you click whatever that is. Then position is, there's like 4 or 5 positions: driver, passenger, where they're wearing their seatbelt, where did airbags deploy. You guys can tell me that. You know this. And then underneath the place where the address, there's a spot where it says LOC again, yes or no, that's loss of consciousness. And then below that, I think is the seatbelt question, right? Helmet, where they weren't a helmet. And then underneath that, there's a place for vitals. You always take one set of vitals. Now, the vitals could be as simple as doing a pulse ox and checking the manual pulse, make sure they have a pulse. You have a radial pulse, you have a blood pressure of at least 90 systolic. So enough to use the brain and the rest of the body. So as long as they got a pulse, I may not go through and do a blood pressure. All depends on what I'm seeing and how bad and why I'm there. Then right below the vitals area is your narrative. So in that, you're going to put basic information is you have a laceration on your head, you should go, you know, see the doctor. The main thing that I put in there is that if your condition worsens, you know, I'll put some kind of blurb up there that says, you know, this is why we're called here, this is the injuries we see, or this the medical condition we see. If your condition worsens, call 911 or seek medical attention if you got. And then I always put check signed against medical advice, because my medical advice is always going to be I am not a lab and I am not a CAT scan. So I don't know what's going on inside you, and I can't tell what your vitals are. I mean, oh, I don't know what your blood looks like. So I can't tell what's going on with you on the inside. So my suggestion is always that they go in, unless obviously they slipped on the ice and that hurts. There's certain times where I'm not as worried about that, but I would check the sign against medical advice. And then did we treat them? Is, I mean, taking vitals is an assessment, not treatment. So if all I did was take vitals on them, then I put no treatment. If I gave someone dextrose to improve their blood sugar, then triggered no transport. And if you look on the back of it, there's another place for the patient name. I usually don't write it there because this is a carbon, supposed to be canned to a carbon copy. You write on this, it transfers all the information here. So the name's already there. But what I will do is call or go to your physician emergency department for follow-up care. If it's head injury, neck injury, you know, I check the appropriate box, and then I go over these boxes to let them know that you have a head injury. You either call 911 or go to the ER if any of the following conditions occur. Read them all out to them, and then once they understand that, then I have them sign it. If I can, I have law enforcement or a firefighter or someone else besides me or my partner witness. That's been a lot of time. That's something that's going to be tough to. Yes. So when you're doing this, when they're refusing, you want to take as much time with them as you can and use as much persuasion, especially if you know they need to go in, to get them to go. We have had people that they refuse going to the rock on a lady. Not too long ago, we were back there 2 hours later and transported them to Gasper because if we kept getting those. I have no problem going back to the house if they need it. So as much as you can, try and get them to go in. And listen carefully to why they're refusing. A lot of people don't want to go in because they just can't afford an ambulance. Can't afford an ER. Well, the county has what we call indigent if someone can't afford it, the hospital can write it off, and still get paid by the parents for that. There are also grants and other things out there that people can get treated. There's no reason for someone not to go in just because they're afraid they can't pay for it. It's your job as patient advocate, but when you get in, let the nurse know, hey, they're really worried about not being able to pay. Be able to pay. You could let them know how to get in touch with billing when you release them or when they go upstairs. That'd be great. And again, inform them of what could happen to them if they don't. Sometimes you can get online, call the doc, say, hey doc, this person really needs to get seen. They're in the middle of a heart attack. They don't want to go. You talk to them. Let the doctor talk. Sometimes then they go, oh, yeah, doctor told me I need to go in. I must need to go in. Paramedics don't know if they're in.
So one thing on this refusal is taking all the possible actions. We had a patient recently that we got called for someone who passed out and had vomited. We got there and they had actually gotten carbon monoxide poisoning. Their CO levels were off the charts when we got there. We gave them oxygen for an hour and a half just talking to them on scene before we finally were able to have them agree to go in. And it took exactly like he said. We had to call the doctor and have the doctor say, hey, you've been sitting here for this long, you've only come down this much. We really need to get you in for like 5 to 6 hours of oxygen. And they finally agreed, okay, yes, doctor probably knows best, let's go in. But we had informed them of everything. We had done all the proper steps. They had done everything but sign the refusal until the doctor was able to say, hey, you really should come in. And that was the straw that finally got them, hey, okay, we need to come in. Sometimes it does take that extra consult sway patients the right way or not.
If they still don't want to go in after that, call the family. See if they don't mind you calling their family member and advising them what's going on. Sometimes family members come over, and even if they don't want to go in, they can come over and stay with them. Be there. So if something does happen, someone's there calling 911. Law enforcement is rarely needed for stuff like this, unless you're dealing with a psychological patient or you're dealing with a child abuse or geriatric abuse incident. In that case, you want to get law enforcement there as quickly as possible, and they can start working that angle of it. Then have them sign the refusal on the bottom. Again, like I said, you can have law enforcement, fire, or even your partner, just not the person that filled it out, sign it. That looks better and when it goes to court, or if it goes to court. So what do you think the risks of beginning treatment or transport without getting permission from the patient?
Yeah.
It's called kidnapping. By touching them, you're committing battery. By taking them to the hospital without their informed consent, it's called kidnapping. So these are charges that could come down on you if you transport without their consent.
And just so you know, people at places like the Douglas Care Center and the Mountain Lodge, places of that, the MOB, when you ask your patient, is it okay if I take you to the hospital today, or do you want to go to the hospital? You're probably gonna get some dirty looks, so just be prepared for that, because in their mind, they've called you to come get this patient. It's still up to us to advocate for that patient, ask them, do you want to go? And especially if they're of sound mind, because if they're mentally sound, we can't force them to go.
And that's especially true, like she mentioned, a lot of those doctors at the urgent care will call for an ambulance without talking or seeing the patient. They will hear just based off check-in signs and symptoms, they'll call without ever talking with that patient ahead of time if they want to.
And if they're stable enough, we won't. You want to drive down to the ER, you're more than welcome to do it. All right, so let's see. What if the patient refuses to sign the refusal of care? Yeah, you can, if they're adamant about not signing it. Oh, this is where it's really good to have another agency there. So whether law enforcement or fire or whatever, you put patient refuse to sign, you initial it, and then underneath it, you print your name, sign it, have the other witness print and sign it. They don't have to sign it. I mean, it's their right not to sign the refusal, but we want to make sure that our butts are covered, that he said doesn't come back that, well, they didn't give me a chance to sign it. Because guess what? I'm going to tear off the whole back piece of paper, and that's being given to the patient. So they're going to have a copy of it, and so the patient refuses to sign it, signed by 2 people, 2 witnesses. So now it's their job to prove that I didn't give them the opportunity.
This becomes especially important in your documentation when you do your PCRs. At the end, a lot of the time, especially with Waters, the system we use, you have the opportunity to upload scanned copies of your refusal so that everything that gets put into that report can be pulled for court. And if you have your supervisor not already put it into your report, if you've already submitted that copy, when it gets pulled, chances are you'll never get called, because they'll have not only your documentation saying in your narrative that this is exactly what happened, here's who witnessed, here's the fact that they didn't want to sign, and then you have a piece of paper already scanned in that says exactly what you just said.
All right, so when patients refuse care, okay, this is just what I kind of told you about. So if you touch the patient or try and treat them, can be viewed in court as assault and battery. Have witnesses to the refusal from the patient that they can change their mind and call back at any time. That is the big one, is that they can always call us back. And I never let them think it's a burden that if they call me. Like, you can call us back at any time. We're more than happy to come out here. Whatever it is, you just let it's a motor vehicle crash. Hey, if you start feeling lightheaded, dizzy, or anything like that, you let the trooper know. They'll call us back. No problem. So don't be afraid of letting them know that. Don't make it sound like it's going to be a burden for you. If possible, have a friend or relative remain with the patient. Can't talk about that. And then document all attempts thoroughly. So I will put how many times I tried to talk them into going in my net. And then make sure what their answer was. If they gave you a reason why they didn't want to go in, put their reasoning, use quotation marks as much as possible. Yeah. All right. Now we're going to get into do not resuscitate and physician orders for life-saving treatments. So this legal document expressing the patient's wishes if the patient is unable to speak for themselves. Do not resuscitate order may be part of advanced directives, may be part of the post document. Should be familiar with living wills and healthcare process. So these are Did you hand out a copy of the pulse?
No, we never did find a copy of the post. But there was
Yes.
a copy of the book.
Yeah, it's not the Wyoming Pulse stuff. Wyoming Pulse is very unique in that in block E of it, there's a box that says, if this box is initialed, nobody can change that document. So, if it's not initialed, then we run into a lot of gray areas. So if we go on call, we go in, guys in cardiac arrest, family wants us to do everything we can, but we go in, look at the refrigerator. He's got a little emergency bracelet that says DNR on it, or a necklace that says DNR on it. We find the pulse agreement. If that box is checked, if someone in there has medical power of attorney on that patient, they can reverse that pulse for them. They have to have medical power of attorney. It can't just be the son or the daughter and one. Has to be medical power of attorney. If that box is checked or initial, then even the medical power of attorney cannot change that pulse. And we will not make any life-saving steps. Now, that being said, you go on a chest pain, and the guy goes, "You got a DNR, but I don't want it. I don't want it. I want you to do it." Guess what? You just rescinded his pulse. So it doesn't matter if he's got that and that box is initial. He himself is rescinded. So then we're going to do everything we can. And a lot of times when we're doing transports, I will ask someone, "Hey, if your heart stops on the way up, what do you want us to do?" And a lot of times they'll tell me if they've got a pulse, it's that. Got a pulse, let me go. If they don't have a pulse, or they don't have DNR, it's tell me to let them go. Guess what? I'm going to find that I wish. Mostly because it's painful to get shot. You know, you're going to do whatever you can if they want it. If they don't want it, they're going to another place. So, you know, usually these people that have the pulse agreements have a terminal illness of some kind or late stages in life, like 80s and 90s years old, and have some medical underlying condition that allows the doctors to give them a pulse. You, as however old you are right now, unless you have some kind of terminal illness, cannot have a doctor make you a pulse.
With that, all of that being said, again, when you go to nursing homes, they're gonna tell you, she has DNR. Well, okay. Then you're gonna wonder why they called. Some of those DNRs, they still want treated. They're still humans. They still want to be treated like a human. What they're trying to tell you is they don't want you to shove something down their throat or put them on a ventilator to keep them alive. But if they need an antibiotic, take them and get them an antibiotic. There's, like he said, a lot of gray area there. They still want treated, so just remember that.
Yeah, the thing I remember about a pulse is it's not a do not treat, it's a do not resuscitate. So it's, don't put a foot tube down my throat, keep me alive. And some of them are that specific. They want CPR. They don't want to be in it. They don't mind being shocked and medicated. They don't want a tube down their throat and be on a ventilator and being kept alive that way.
Did you guys see more of an increase in DNRs and pulses like during the after COVID? What's that?
Another thing to think about is there's three of the DNs. There's DNR, DNI, and DNT. So they do not resuscitate. That's nothing. DNI is that do not innovate, and there is do not transport on a handful of where they are fine with everything as long as they're where they're at. And this usually comes into play, especially with hospice patients, because with hospice patients, if they're transported by ambulance to an emergency room, they cancel their hospice contracts by doing that.
Yeah, we have to reapply for hospice.
And that's an extensive process that nobody wants to go through. The other gray area is, like you mentioned, those DNR bracelets and DNR necklaces do not mean anything if I do not have paper in them. Because anyone can buy a DNR bracelet or something off Amazon, but unless that paper's there and signed, you still have to do some type of efforts till it's presented to you.
We used to have a lady down here at Riverside Plaza that had on her fridge a white piece of paper with DNR. I was like, here, you have to go to the doctor and get the right paperwork. That means nothing to me.
That's my mother. But I've told you what I want.
Yeah.
Don't mean shit. If it's Jim and Tanner that show up,
People will have DNR or tattoos. Yes. Or you can sue me later.
Get the wrong person here.
All right, living will. So what's a living will? Living will is something that usually these are filled out for people who are in a medical facility, and it's just expressing their consent to how they want to be treated while they're in the hospital, and it also gives some legal power. They in there will say who can make decisions for them. So it's a living will because it's constantly, it can be changed anytime by that person without having to go through a lawyer. It's usually something done in hospitals for people who are going to be there for more than a day or two. I was at this hospital for 3 weeks. I had to fill out a living will while I was there to tell them who can make decisions for me and something. Healthcare proxies, that's your medical power of attorneys, or people with power of attorney. So there's 3 forms of power of attorney. There's an overreaching power of attorney that you have power of attorney over everything. There's medical power of attorney and financial power. So people will give these out to, like, when my mom was alive, my brother had financial power of attorney because he lived out here in Colorado. Well, my sister lived in. My sister lived in the same town my mom did. She had medical power of attorney, so she can make medical decisions while they're there.
Federal Secretary, respond to 100 South Wind River Drive, D102, or 11.
Okay. Other legal issues. So what other legal issues might you think about for the medical field? Yeah, so HIPAA. So Healthcare Insurance Privacy and Protection Act was designed for you to be able to go into your doctor's office and say, I would like a copy of my medical records so that I can take them to my new doctor. Or my insurance company would like to get a copy of my medical records. So that is what HIPAA was originally designed to do. It's kind of gotten broader than that, to where people were being told, or nurses and doctors were like talking to everybody about patients, and we're just getting around to the patients. Oh, I heard you had an epidemic last week in the hospital. Well, the patient didn't tell me that, so I got out to the hospital, and so it's become a privacy thing for patients. So when we talked the first day, we mentioned about not talking to their patient, not getting way too far. Where's that? Your hip is right there. Yeah, we're gonna put the hip off. Cause I can go on, about it. DIP was one of those ones that I studied a lot when I was in law enforcement. We'll get to that in a minute. All right. So negligence is something that should have been done, was not done, or was done incorrectly. So what that means is you showed up on scene. You should have done at least basic care on this person, but instead you said, you know, it's 20th time you did on that person, oh, what's going on? I'm sort of a, oh, you're always sort of a cross back and you don't do anything for that patient. You should have done something, but you didn't. Or you did something and you shouldn't have. So you want to make sure negligence is anytime like going outside your scope of practice. Anybody watch MASH? Anybody remember MASH? So radar cuts the guy's throat, puts a ballpoint or a pin in there. Now the guy can miraculously breathe. Yeah, if you guys do that, negligence, because you don't have the training. So if you go above your scope of practice, or you don't operate within your scope of practice, then you're committing negligence. Must prove that the EMT had a duty to act. We'll get into duty to act here in just a minute. And by whatever you did up here, you breached that duty. You failed to provide the standard of care expected to, or you failed to act. They must also prove that there's a proximate causation. So what you did is the reason their condition deteriorated. And you may be required to pay damages. So this is pretty much a civil aspect of it. This isn't something that is criminal. Yeah. We'll get to that. Yeah. Duty, remember the words duty to act. Okay. So these are lawsuits, usually classified as torts. Some Latin words there. Basically means the thing speaks for itself. So basically, when they present this court, if it screams you did something wrong, you're going to probably lose that case. Okay. Okay, duty to act, obligation to provide care to a patient. Duty to act is not always clear, off duty, on duty, but out of jurisdictions. Basically, this goes to you have a duty to act that if you are working a shift, like right now, Tanner's covering for me for secondary. Had we not had someone cover for me for secondary tonight, I would be teaching this class to go out and do whatever she's doing. I would have a duty to act to go on that because I am technically on duty. That being said, if you're off duty and you slap a whole bunch of EMS stickers all over your truck and you stop at a rest and you get out and you touch that patient and begin assessing them, and then you leave before EMS gets there, you've breached your duty to act. The minute you touch that patient, start treating that patient, you now have a duty to act and care for that patient until someone of your level or higher arrives on scene. That is jurisdiction is really one of the biggest unclear areas. So we do transports, Casper, so we're in Natrona County a lot. We go down to Cheyenne, we go to Denver, we go to Swedish, in Denver. Medical Center of the Rockies in Loveland, we go to Clear Valley and in Fort Collins. If we are on the way back, we don't have patients. That's another key to that is having a patient on board. we don't have a patient, when we drive by a motor vehicle crash, we have the duty to act. We're in an ambulance, we're geared up, we're on duty, but we're out of our location, out of our jurisdiction. We have a duty to act. Not legally, no. We can drive right by. Yeah, we're not obligated. Do we have an ethical, maybe a moral obligation to at least stop and see what's going on? Yeah. So legally, we could drive right by that crash and not worry about it. But morally, it's gonna be hard for us to say, yeah, I'm going to just leave these people and not worry about it. Yeah, an incident just recently, a couple months ago, that I had to make a tough decision to continue on to the call I was on or stop the call that I was on. And in doing that, first thing I did was call in the crash behind me. Second thing I did was right still responding to the crash rear. Once I said yes, they're just not on scene, they would turn around and go back to the crash behind me. But those are the tough decisions you gotta make. I have a duty to act because I'm called to this call. Now I have to make a moral decision, and that's the decision. Do I take the crash that just happened, or do I continue on to the one I had, hope someone else can help? We only have 3 ambulances that are on duty. Yeah. And we're getting ready to go down to 2 ambulances. So that decision making is going to start playing in for us as to what calls we continue on to, or do we start triaging those calls? Someone who fell and had a hurt leg versus cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest is probably going to take precedent. Now, which of those calls came in first? That's where it starts coming into making that judgment. Whether your duty to act goes by sequence or by triage. And always follow local laws and protocols. We have protocols in place to take care of the gray areas. And follow your own conscience. Abandonment. Again, this is a civil action that can turn into a criminal action. If you start caring for a patient and then discontinue that care without transferring the patient to another medical professional, it's called abandonment. That person dies, you can be charged with negligent homicide. So that article that she handed out, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But when you're reading through that, ask, did they have a duty to act? Were they negligent in their duties? And in their case, I believe it did end up in them getting arrested. So it can lead into further criminal actions. So, and the main thing is, like, if I arrive on scene and I start doing paramedic stuff to this patient, I'm off duty or whatever it is, and Tanner, who's in advanced unit to me, rides on scene in his ambulance and goes to take control of that patient. Guess what? I'm riding in with that patient. I did paramedic stuff, and I can't hand off to someone with a lower level. So now I have to ride in with that patient. That's why a lot of times it's funny when doctors show up on scene, they start treating the patient. I've told them, hey, get them back to the truck. They're like, what? I was like, you're doing stuff above my level right now. And he'll start backpedaling off. He's like, all right, I'll just write that you abandoned the patient. And then they're like, oh, give them back at this. I've had doctors writing like this back when we were basic service, because they were doing all kinds of manipulative stuff that I'm like, no, I am not bringing that patient into my ER saying I did that, or having them think I did that. So, yeah. All right, Good Samaritan laws. Every state has a Good Samaritan. You can fall under this if you stop to take care of somebody, as long as you don't go into your scope of practice. Now, it's nice for me too, because your scope of practice is basically first aid. You don't carry oxygen on your personal vehicle. And a lot of the meds you can give, you don't carry on. So just stopping, putting a Band-Aid on, or putting pressure on a wound, stuff like that. As long as you don't go into your scope of practice, you fall under the Good Samaritan. It's just a certain extent, even if you go into your scope of practice, but you don't abandon your patient, you're still falling underneath the Good Samaritan.
That can also be like CPR.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you're doing it, good faith. So the good faith law, as long as you're acting in good faith, you're good. Okay. Nobody's gonna fault you. This has been challenged a lot over the years since Good Samaritan laws came out. People would get pulled out of the vehicle and their leg was broken. Now it's broken worse because they were pulled out of a burning vehicle. Or now they're paralyzed. And they're like, well, I'd rather just stay in there and burn than be paralyzed. Oh, no. Reasonable man would not have wanted to be burned alive. And so that's where it comes down to a reasonable man theory. And did you act in good faith? So, and like I said, in some situations, it may not cover you. The CPR is something that's readily available to the community, and everybody does it. It's going to be hard to prove that you do act in good faith. And it doesn't protect you from gross negligence. So once again, if the vehicle's not on fire, they're not complaining of anything, they're sitting in their car waiting, you hear the sirens, you know, EMS and fire are getting close, and all of a sudden you rip that guy out of the car, and he's got a broken back, now you severed his spine. Well, there was no reason to move him. So that might be seen as gross negligence. I think someone's leg off because it's trapped in the vehicle and the vehicle's not on fire. That'd be gross negligence. So think about really to be into this gross negligence or in violation of the law, you have to know that you're doing it. You got to know that you're not acting within your scope of practice. You got to know that you're trying to be a hero and not doing what's best for the patient. And if it's a violation of law, you should know that. You arrive on the scene of patient cardiac arrest. The family says she has a DNR, but they don't know where it is. How should you handle this? Yep. I would handle this. In fact, I did this when I was a student. I needed one more innovation to get signed off on my stuff. And they said, we don't know where the DNR is. Oh, we have it. Fire department already started CPR. I was like, you guys good doing CPR? They're like, yep. I put my tube in, bagged until my partner came out or my preceptors came out and said, yep, we found DNR. I'm like, okay. Come on, let's see. But did it quick enough that, you know, would I have waited if I'd known that DNR was on the fridge? I'd have waited. But they actually had to go find it. It was in the filing cabinet in his room. And most common places to find medical information. And our green plaza is down here. You'll find it on the back of the door. Some places you go to in other jurisdictions, they will have their medications, DNR and all that is in the freezer. It's in the door in the freezer. Other places, DNRs are on the fridge, just magneted to the fridge, or taped to the headboard on the bedroom. And that way they're easy to find. But you look one place and it's not there, look another, you got 4 places to look. Should never be locked away in a box. All right, you are off duty. Arrive on the scene of vehicle crash. Police and EMS have not yet arrived. Are you legally obligated to stop and render it? No, you're not. And I would say if police and EMS are on scene, just keep it. Don't even look at it. Just keep a nice even pace past it. As firefighters attest to the looky-loos, so don't be a looky-loo, just drive by it, don't create accidents. Right, now we're gonna get into confidentiality, HIPAA. Health insurance portability, I think I said privacy. Portability and Accountability Act. HIPAA was mostly initially made so that you could take your information from one place to another and that insurance could get to your information. HIPAA can be shared with healthcare providers who are within I can't think of the word. Well, it talks about the continuing care. So I bring someone into the hospital from EMS. I can go back and ask some nurses involved in that care and say, hey, how'd you do? And they can tell me. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that exchange. Yeah, Cher wasn't on the call, but she goes in and says, hey, I heard so-and-so came in yesterday, how's they doing? They can't share that information. My wife works over at Douglas Care Center. She's the MBS coordinator. She usually knows if the patient's been picked up before I get home. In a certain aspect of it, if that patient died or if that patient's being admitted, I can let her know that they're being admitted because she's in that continuing care of that patient. Because now she has to take them out of sentence for their care center. So if they don't continue to get charged for being in the care center. I can't talk to her about someone that I picked up in a motor vehicle. It was a lot nicer when she worked in the ER. Just talked to her about it. But now it's gotten to the point where even one of her grandkids we picked them up on a motor vehicle crash and brought them in. I can go home and I transport them. So it's just that's the issue. And where it comes down to it's so hard job to do. You see a lot of gross, nasty stuff first. And so who do you talk to? Yeah, take it home. Because that's it. You can't talk to your partner. You can't talk to your boss. You talk to the people that were involved in that. As long as they were involved, law enforcement, fire, EMS, nurses at the hospital, doctors, as long as they were involved, then you guys can discuss that. I just, yeah. Yeah. Now, where it comes into question is I'll transport someone to Casper. And there for a long time, Casper wouldn't share information. We'd call them up and say, hey, we transport this guy out there. the other day, I just wanted to see how I'm doing. And they said, well, that's HIPAA. No, it's not. It's helping me find out what happened. The other thing where information can be shared is if it's an instructional environment. So when we're in here, talk to you guys, we'll give you real world examples. One thing we'll leave out is identifying features of addresses, names. Now, what's going to happen is you guys are going to be in doing your ride time and your ER time, and there's going to be interesting cases that you may bring up to the class. Or you guys on fire when you're not doing your ride time may go on a call of particular interest, and we may bring it up in class. If you know the person or you get enough information from it that you go, well, I know what this is. Just keep to yourself as far as it goes. We'll talk about the case and use it as case reference without giving any identifying features about it. And you will know the outcome because you were there and you did whatever. But just make sure you're not sharing names. So we're a small community. And just looking around, everybody pretty much knows somebody. We could connect the dots in this room and be the 7 separations or
2 degrees of separation.
yeah, 2 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon or whatever it is. Yeah.
7 degrees of separation.
Yeah. Law enforcement involvement. If it is an active investigation, you can share certain information about it. Okay. Usually it's going to be what he said, what was smelled. So if I can smell alcohol on someone or marijuana on someone, and the guy was involved in a DUI crash, law enforcement comes up to me, they're on scene or in the hospital, but it's within a reasonable time frame. He goes, did you smell any alcohol? I can say this. Yeah. Usually what they said is a gray area, but as long as it's an active investigation, if it's the next day and they ask me, did you smell alcohol? I can still say yes to them, but I can't tell them any other information. I'll tell you just how screwed up it is that when I first got my EMT certification, I had the instructors in my course saying, oh yeah, we saw crack pipes on scene, we took it underneath the car. Okay, you just committed a crime because you messed with crime scene. But don't be picking stuff underneath the car. Don't have to help you with police and say I can't answer that. If it's a HIPAA violation, they ask you what their injuries are. They don't need to know their injuries. They can find that out first. You can say, yeah, he's injured. He needs to go to the hospital now. But don't go into detail. But stuff that isn't patient medical patient related for the law enforcement, if they ask. Now, where EMTs get in trouble is they go to the cops and say, hey, did you see that huge bag of marijuana in the back seat? They start volunteering information about what the patient told them. Patient said there was machine guns running in the seat. Worried about you guys finding it. Just patient told you that in confidentiality. Can't share that. He asked you about the gun running in the seat. Said, yeah, there's gun running in the seat. Patient told me that. Why? Because it has nothing to do with the patient. You just can't volunteer. That makes sense.
Unless it's like
If it's a safety issue, like there's an active bomb in the car. Yeah. There's a loaded firearm. I noticed a loaded firearm in its front seat. Yeah, that's stuff you can share. Guy's got a weapon on him. You can tell the officer he can come in and secure it. Now, is that mean he's gonna get in trouble for that? No, it's just gonna say, in Wyoming, he's got a pistol. on it. We want that secured and with law enforcement houses. Otherwise, everything else has to be done through a subpoena. And hopefully you never get called into court. but it does happen. In fact, our last class, JJ got called into court twice on incidents that I was the lead on. She did the reports on it. So I got out of court. All right, so medical alert identifications. That's what they look like. Look for these on the wrist, the neck. Some, they're getting to the point where they're getting kind of like flashy, like jewelry type stuff. So they may not look exactly like that. They should have some kind of snake with a stick, and it should say either MA or medical alert somewhere on. They make them, they originally came out as bracelets. They have anklets on them now. They have bracelets. They have necklaces. So those are the three places you want to look to see if they have any medical alerts. And like I said, some people tattoo what their medical conditions are. You know, a couple of them that have diabetic across their forearm. It's good way of letting people know. Unless your arm gets removed. There's also medical cards, but I don't go through people's wallets usually. The only thing I do is if they're unconscious, I might look at their wallet to see what their name is. I'm not looking for medications and stuff like that. They can include heart conditions, allergies, diabetes, epilepsy. Basically any disease process that they normally take medication for or normally treated for, they can get these medical alerts for. Organ donors, usually this is located on the license. There is a certain amount of time after someone dies that we can harvest the organs. So depending on what they die from, you will keep them alive. So if they're an organ donor, we do CPR on them, get them into the hospital so that they can make the determination what's viable. A lot of times we don't know their organs. So there's probably a lot of organs that gone to waste just because we don't know. And that's just unfortunately the way things happen. If they do die in the hospital here in Casper are very good about get in touch with people that transport them and get them up here as quickly as possible to transport them. And then if you know they're a donor, let the receiving hospital know. Let's see here, safe haven laws. I'm not sure if Wyoming has one to look at that. So I know they talked about it. Nebraska was like right after these came out, or they started talking about them. I know Nebraska did it. Scottsbluff Fire Department has a safe haven consideration. But basically it means a child or infant can be dropped off at any fire, police, or EMS station. No questions asked, dropped off and left, and nothing can be done to the parents about abandoning their child. States do have different guidelines for the ages of the children. In other words, Trevor can't drop you off today. Oh no, you're 18 now. No. So, yeah, so you can't drop your 17-year-old off, but you can drop your 2-year-old off. Those are the laws there. It was meant for mothers with unwanted pregnancies to have a safe option other than abortion to place their kid in someone else. Okay, crime scenes. So crime scenes, we're gonna go through this pretty quickly. The main thing about a crime scene is motor vehicle crashes, domestic abuse situations, self-inflicted gunshot wounds, basically everything you go into could be considered a crime scene. So when you go into it, you want to go in as much as you can, not disturb anything. Unfortunately, when we go into like a situation where there's no pulse, CPR is in progress, it turns into a tornado. Stuff gets thrown pretty much everywhere. The main thing about that is when you leave, you take your bag and your mom. The garbage that hit the floor gets fixed. If you moved anything, you let the officers know that, hey, the lamp was in the way, we had to move it. Patient was found on the bed, we moved him to the floor. Stuff like that. If you move something, you let the officer know. If law enforcement, if it is a violent scene, bar fight, domestic violence, shooting, you wait for law enforcement to arrive first and they clear the scene. Okay. And it's for your protection. They got the guns and the rest. Once the scene is safe, then the EMT's priority is patient care. Know what evidence is. So when we talk about evidence, if there's a gunshot wound to the chest, we have to cut the clothes off. We don't cut through the hole made by the hole. If it's stabbing, we try not to make that incision larger. We'll usually cut that fabric out or cut around it and try and keep it in place the best we can. We can remove it, not the knife. We can remove the clothing without making the hole bigger. We'll remove the clothing. Basically, all that is sexual violence. Yeah, going on sexual assault. You make sure that if the patient has clothing on and you have to remove it, it's put in a paper bag, not a plastic bag. That will keep it from molding and from growing stuff that's not necessarily involved with crime. And it prevents it from contaminating the evidence. That might be. And as much as you can, take steps to preserve the crime scene. So one of the biggest things is motor vehicle crash. We pull up, and where do we pull up? We pull up way ahead or way behind. We pull up right next to it. Where do we pull up? So we don't have to haul equipment a long ways, we usually pull up right next to it, right? Right, what do we normally drive? Skid marks, tracks, stuff like that. Now, the traffic investigator will be able to work around what evidence we use. I was in law enforcement for 8 years and still do a crash reconstruction, even with other people's tires through it. Where it comes into it is we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So if you see skid marks on a dirt road, try to park ahead of them or behind them so that you're not in the way of interfering with the investigation. Find alcohol in the vehicle, don't touch it, just leave it where it is. Weapons, there had an accident today up in up on I-25 that they found a stolen gun and after the guy was taken to the hospital. That was kind of, we're assuming it was a first, but you know, there's stuff that, you know, is found in the vehicle after ambulance as well. So try not to disturb as much as you can. Like I said, if it's on the floor, not in your bag, when that
when I'm treating the patient, either cardiac arrest or whatever, I try and throw as much garbage as I can in the bags. That way it's not a mess on the floor. If they die on scene, what is on them stays on them. So the stickers from the 12 lead, the defib pads, and if we intubate them in the ET tube, I'll stay there. We don't touch them. Yeah. Because what happens is if we start pulling that ET tube out, and it does some damage to the throat, but it just ruins physical evidence. So we just leave everything in place. Condition of seeing the patient, fingerprints, footprints. So if you go on a scene where there's already a dead body and you're just going in to confirm it, one person will go in, not the whole team. They'll take the monitor in, check the patient. They will go one tap in, one tap out. And if there's footprints, like a snowy day like today, you see the footprints of the officer going in, you follow those footprints in. And then follow those footprints in. Creates less disturbance of the crime scene. Microscopic evidence, that's why when we leave, you don't want to be cleaning the bag right away because law enforcement will come and take the bottom of the bag or the bottom of the monitor to see if there's any hair, blood, anything like that that might be on the monitor. Remember what you touch, minimize the impact. Always work with the police on the fence. Special reporting. State of Wyoming, there are two things that you have to report. Child abuse, elder abuse. Okay. The hospital, if they suspect human trafficking, they have to report that. Violence, gunshot wounds, stabbings, anything comes into the ER, they have to report that. Sexual assault, I think is a gray area here. I think a lot of them will try and talk the sexual assault victim into reporting it, but it's not a mandatory report. And we'll try and get them to do what's called a SANE kit or a rape kit, so that they have the evidence, so if they choose down the road to report it, that evidence is already gathered. So, in situations where restraint may be necessary. If we have to restrain a patient in the back of the truck, the only people we report that to is just medical direction. Don't, hey, you're restraining this patient, we're bringing it. Give them the reason. I think one of the things they're talking about here is about reporting it is that if they're a violent patient, you need law enforcement to help you. So like we're limiting this to how and why we restrain people. Whereas law enforcement has a wider scope that they can practice in there. So if the patient's getting violent, you don't get violent. You get out of the way, get out of the truck, and call law enforcement to have them come do violence. They're more prepared for it and more readily armed to deal with it. They can phase them. It's your job. Oh. Intoxicated people with injuries, we do not, the state of Wyoming, have to report that at all. We might get reported to the state somehow, but we don't have to report. We get called to someone who fell down out in the street, more than likely, law enforcement is going to do this there anyways, but it's not something that we have to report. Mentally incompetent people with injuries, again, that falls under geriatric child. categories. We do report it if the injuries are suspicious. And same with children. I mean, we don't report every child that gets hurt, and we get called from the parents. They come pick them up. If we suspect child abuse, then we have to report it. If we suspect that this is for mentally competent, you like a better term.
Differently able.
For the differently able, if they are injured and we suspect abuse or violence against them, then we have to report. And then you want to always check the local laws and programs. Other ethical responsibilities, morality. Person's opinion about what is right and wrong. Ethics, the standard behavior for a profession. See how many slides. So ethical expectations for an EMT is to be honest in reporting, refrain from actions that could cause harm, and work to help the patient. Used to be the mantra was do no harm. So basically you don't want to worsen the patient's condition. You look like you got a thought. Okay. Okay. It was an intense reading. All right, more ethical expectations. Respect the rights of adults to make their own decision. Treat all patients fairly and justly. Assist others in learn your profession. Report misconduct. And make sure research is approved. So, what's that last one mean? No, yeah, you can't start practicing on people. Something that you heard it on.
Just TikTok show that doesn't make you patients.
Right, exactly. We don't get to practice on our patients things that aren't true. All right, chapter review. Medical and legal and ethical issues are part of every EMS call. Consent may be expressed or implied. May be expressed or implied. Know the difference. Fully oriented patients may refuse care. You cannot force them to go to the hospital. You'll hear us say that all the time to people, that we can't kidnap them. Negligence is failing to act properly when you have a duty to act. And when do you have a duty to act? Right.
And you don't have to do so.
Yeah, the other time you will have a duty to act is when. So you're off duty. What might you put you in a position where you have a duty to act? If you actively start treatment on that patient, and now you have a duty to act. You can't just stop that treatment.
And part of that duty to act, if you start the treatment for your level, it's not as applicable, but if you choose to go higher in your career, a paramedic cannot give a patient to an advanced class or a basic class. Paramedic has to do, if he does anything above that scope of practice, he cannot hand off to them. So if he carries IV stuff, does an IV on a patient, and Ian and Glenn are the crew that comes up on that scene, he's riding with them till they're at the hospital. It's his patient until
Why carry basic stuff?
carries on some stuff or some stuff.
Fun stuff, yeah. All right, so abandonment is leaving a patient after you've initiated care and before you have transferred a patient to a person of equal or higher training. Confidentiality is an obligation to reveal personal information you obtain about the patient except to other healthcare professionals involved in the patient's care. Under court order,
or when the patient signs a release. So a patient can always sign a release. You're never going to be involved in that process. Because by that time, you've got your truck washed and you don't care. So you're never going to go to a patient saying, hey, I need you to release this information. Take that back, you may. So I've had a couple of verbal releases because, and you'll see it later on down the road, hopefully, for injuries that I've seen that are just really, really cool. And the patient's like, I just want to see what it looks like. Like, I'll take a picture of it and show it to you if you let me use it for training purposes. And they're like, hell yeah. So, yeah. Should you probably have a written release. You don't mind, you're not gonna be able to tell who it is, but it'll be good. We'll get to see it. You may be sued or held legally liable for any of these issues. Although you're rarely held liable when you act within your scope of practice, according to the standard of care, you carefully document your call, and you work in good faith. Crime scene, take care of it. Don't go trashing it. Remove something, let someone know. Yeah, don't go blabbing to everybody about what's going on. People have been fired for it. Okay, questions to consider. Find scope of practice, negligence, duty to act, abandonment, confidentiality. Ms. Chair was able to make you a list of key terms. I believe all those are in it. So what steps might you take if the patient refuses treatment? That's done, and then so you can contact their physician or your medical control. Witness, having someone else sign it, saying that they refused. You want to tell them what their course of actions are. So usually if someone's going to refuse, they'll tell them they can go in. If they don't want to go in by us, that's fine. They can go in by private vehicle and then call us back later. If it's not something that's medically necessary that they need to be seen right now, then just follow up with their primary care provider the next day. Give them options to get seen, even if they don't want to be seen right now. The other thing is, given the consequences of not being seen if it is serious, up to and including that. There's a lot of types of evidence, so. Take a quick second to read this and tell me what your thoughts. Yep. You gonna do CPR? Transport. Okay, any questions? I know I was kind of down and dirty and we're don't have more time to practice searcher. Oh, we do have 20 minutes left, so if you guys want to jump on searcher and push each other down there's
Control.
control. That is always the one thing I tell my patients is we start going down, it's like, I'll let you go and we'll meet you at the bottom. Do it. Thanks a lot.
So I don't know if there's anybody here on the one call, use the stairs. Go like 3 steps.
No,
Where's our sign?
yeah. Just kidding.
Oh, have they been having you guys sign in on the roster? I think that was mentioned at some point.
What's that?
So we got a roster sheet that you guys are supposed to sign in on. And make sure you're doing that. For those who. There we go.
I'm so sorry. But listen, it will have to be here for my disclaimer. Tomorrow you guys are gonna have 2 guest speakers. Boardroom and Wilkers guys. You guys, I don't know what Jay is doing also was for the students because she's, I don't know young people.
She ain't here. She gotta figure it out.
Where's the one?
She right, she,
Well, that's fine if she wants to take. the role. That's
well, see, I said that. But, hey, guys are off your control. Maybe comes and talks to you.
no here, so.
No. Really all you missed was,
Oh, what is that?
no, they did those yours.
Go ahead, I got.
No, I have my own. I don't need yours.
No.
Besides, yours right, black is done.
I'm gonna have you quoted saying that.
She said it.
Out
I
of,
mean, if you
out
need
of
me to be
context.
more specific, black pins are stupid, but black is not.
Yeah, quote that. Exactly how she said it. Are you now? Are you now?
That's shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you just read chapters 1 and 2, she gave you the flash drive, right?
Yeah, she took it away from me.
I found my flash drive from last year.
Right.
It's also black, so that really doesn't support your
It's
fairly.
not the old start.
So on that flash drive, there's you'll have PowerPoints.
Advanced.
If you read through the book,
Just
go
like
through
3
PowerPoints. That'll hit you pretty much for those
It's got all the
responsibilities.
it's like
Main
3
thing
floors.
on that is your role is that's about how you want to
Like
be
if you're
careful
back
about
on housing.
ambulance. You care for your
It was a
patients
very
that way.
laid back classes.
And
compared.
then they help with
It's another 6 months.
what's that?
Advancing to.
It's not 3 months, 4 months.
Well, we did a 5.
Yeah.
Because it's not just stabbing people. I don't have to have medical direction to give the same drugs you can give, and then I have a few more drugs.
You should-
Superglottics. Superglottic airways, which are, I think, like some superglottics are superior to some others, but we don't carry the ones that are superior.
I noticed no one moved towards the surgery.
I'll go sit and I'll let people.
I'm gonna go and go for it. It'll be on duty. So,
Unless you should have a whole entire script from one or the other.
yeah, it's just not working comp if you get injured because Woodshed EMS training. We don't have
I've
any.
been paid for it. Speaking of being paid. Also firefighters, yeah. Yeah.
$150.
$150.
Oh, so
Okay, Danny? Okay,
What?
$150 for class?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of what the conversation.
Oh, well, y'all are still here. No, it'll have to be cash or check. 'Cause
Okay.
we're poor folk around here. We don't have no way to
Have
take
a
cards.
square.
We don't have a square. Trevor has a square.
He does have to swear all that.
So, yeah,
Except for I
it's
know
over
he
there
was
on
like,
third chair.
Okay.
Essentially, it's all yes. No. Let's just make sure we got all this structured.
They said they didn't have a square. I said, yeah, you do. It's something on the stair chair. I'm aware. I have the conversations.
Also be careful when you're rolling that,
Okay.
linoleum and carpet floors.
Brown, you want a 2X t-shirt. You want a 1X tall.
You used to buy exclusive to us because
Thank you.
That's certain, yeah.
JJ. Okay. So, did you want a shirt? Yeah. Yeah. What size you want?
You're like, yeah,
That's not
give me all Are they just like unisex
you
t-shirts?
didn't
They are
have the boy.
unisex t-shirts. They are very much my stocking for the asking.
Perfect, small. Or
Ian.
those t-shirts.
Extra large.
Yes.
Danny.
Um,
Mark.
yes.
Yeah, same size, right, yeah.
Lynn. Extra.
Okay, there we go.
Zen wants. What?
Shouldn't touch it, you're fine.
Seven.
Are you doing, you're not. Okay.
Well, right now I'm just working on t-shirts. So one second. You. Let's see. Oh,
He wears an extra large shoe. Maybe you need to go to
I wear medium.
medium. Really need to go to the gym.
You go to the gym, get some arms. Go to the chest.
Lunch on some miracle girl. Gain a couple inches.
Quarter pounders cheese good too.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, that's what. I was like doing so good.
Cashier at
My
McDonald's.
guys down to
Alright.
223,
missing
and then they were
it. T-shirt.
The gym right, gym right here, Tanner.
I ran into Dustin like 30 minutes after.
Okay, so the t-shirts come in the cost of your box. What's that?
so expenses that we haven't covered really, in costs that aren't covered by your fees is the national registry stuff. So
Oh,
you probably the most recent one to take it, how much of it? Remember?
It was like
For- Yeah, if you get on there, it's so it.
okay,
But that's the first time.
you said small. Okay, so the shirts are included in the price of your class. If you want an additional shirt or a hoodie, purchase them. So for 35, there's your this hoodie there. Hoodies are 45. What? They're all done. You do want to white room, you can that shirt up if you
But since someone owns the business that's going to be doing the shirts, you might be able to talk to them.
You can have a different colored shirt just because But if it's for class purposes, if you're teaching and learning it, I like it. So, you want a sweatshirt,
Yeah, cause I'm,
in addition to your t-shirt.
yeah, cause I'm gonna start getting some of these right along to that.
You want an extra large in your life, it's really not saying yeah, you want a hoodie.
Yeah.
Are you doing, did you say you forgot to clock out?
No, I forgot, well, I did forget to clock out, but I forgot to stop the recording.
Oh, I hope you forgot that.
This is gonna,
Did you say that you also wanted a sweatshirt in addition to it? Now, if you don't want a
Because we had-
t-shirt and you'd rather have a sweatshirt, you can go.